When my daughter Jessica said, "Dad, if you truly loved me, you'd make my dream wedding happen," while showing me a $250,000 proposal from a luxury wedding planner, I felt something shift inside my chest. Not anger. Not even disappointment. Just a quiet clarity that had been building for years. I looked at her perfectly manicured hand holding that glossy brochure, at my son-in-law Brandon smirking behind her like he'd already won, and I said the words that would change everything: "I think I'm going to buy a boat instead." The silence that followed was delicious. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. 3 months earlier, life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. My name is Walter Henderson, though most people call me Walt, and at 68 years old, I'd earned the right to enjoy my retirement in peace. The cottage on Lighthouse Point Road had been home for 32 years, the place where Eleanor and I raised our 2 kids and built a life around the smell of salt air and the sound of harbor bells. For years since cancer took her, and I still caught myself brewing 2 cups of coffee some mornings. The front door opened without a knock. Jessica had keys, had always had keys, and used them with the casual entitlement of someone who'd never been told no. She swept in wearing what I'd learned was called athleisure, though it probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Brandon followed, already on his phone, barely acknowledging my existence. I was at the kitchen table working on a model ship, or replica of the USS Constitution I'd been building for months. My hands still remember the precision from 40 years of marine engineering, designing vessels that could withstand the Pacific's worst moods. These tiny wooden pieces required the same attention to detail, the same respect for craft. "Dad, we need to talk about the wedding." Jessica didn't sit down, just stood there with her phone in hand like she was ready to take notes on my response. "Brandon's parents are contributing $75,000, and we need you to match it. Actually, we need a bit more. $100,000 would cover everything perfectly." I set down the miniature mast I'd been shaping. $100,000. It's not just a wedding, Dad. It's a destination event. Napa Valley, 3 days, 200 guests. We're talking about creating memories that last forever. She swiped through photos on her phone, showing me images of vineyard ceremonies and reception halls that looked like European castles. "Brandon's colleagues will be there, important clients. This is as much about our future as it is about celebrating our love." Brandon finally looked up from his own phone. "Walt, I know it seems like a lot, but think of it as an investment. The connections we'll make at this wedding could change our whole trajectory. These are the kind of people who notice details." I picked up my coffee mug, noting how it had gone cold. "You got married 4 years ago. I paid $30,000 for that wedding." Jessica's expression tightened. "That was different. That was a mistake, obviously, since it didn't last. This is my real wedding. My forever wedding. Your daughter was born from that mistake." I kept my voice level, thinking of 7-year-old Sophie, who'd stayed with me just last weekend and helped me paint the cottage shutters. "Does she know you call her father a mistake? Don't twist this around." Jessica's voice carried that sharp edge she'd developed over the years. "Sophie has nothing to do with this conversation. We're talking about my future with Brandon, about giving us the start we deserve." I stood and walked to the kitchen window overlooking the harbor. The morning sun caught the masts of sailboats bobbing in their slips, and I could see Rick Palmer down at the marina, probably opening up the captain's cup for the early fisherman crowd. Eleanor and I used to walk down there every Sunday morning for cinnamon rolls and harbor gossip. "Jessica, I paid $85,000 for your college education. I gave you $60,000 for your condo down payment. I've been sending you $1,500 every month for 3 years because you said you needed help getting established." I turned back to face them. "That's over $200,000 I've invested in your life." "Invested?" Brandon laughed, actually laughed. "That's not how family works, Walt. You don't keep score with your kids. That money was given freely, and now Jessica needs your help again. That's what fathers do." Something in his tone, that casual dismissal of my decades of sacrifice, made my jaw tighten. What do you do, Brandon? For work, I mean. He straightened, defensive. I'm in commercial real estate. You know that. And how's that going? Because from what I understand, you haven't closed a deal in 8 months. Jessica stepped between us. How dare you interrogate him? Brandon is building his portfolio, making connections. Not everyone hits success immediately. Some people need support while they climb. Support. I repeated the word slowly. Is that what we're calling it? Dad, I can't believe you're being like this. Her eyes filled with tears, the same tactic she'd used since she was 12 years old. After everything you and Mom always said about family coming first, about being there for each other. Mom would be so disappointed in you right now. The mention of Eleanor hit like a physical blow, but I'd learned enough about manipulation over the years to recognize it. My late wife had been generous to a fault, yes, but she'd also been the one to quietly warn me about enabling versus helping. One of our last conversations had been about Jessica's spending habits, Eleanor's worry that we'd created someone who expected rather than earned. Your mother wanted to sail the Oregon coast. I said it quietly, looking past them toward the harbor again. For 20 years, she talked about buying a sailboat and just going. Exploring every inlet and bay from here to California. We were going to do it when I retired, but then the cancer came fast. Jessica wiped her eyes impatiently. What does that have to do with my wedding? Everything. I turned back to them. It has everything to do with it. I spent 40 years building ships for other people. I paid for your life, your education, your first wedding, your home. I've been sending money every month while watching you post pictures of weekend trips to Portland and new furniture and designer bags. So you've been stalking my social media? Jessica's tears vanished, replaced by indignation. That's creepy, Dad. It's public, sweetheart. You share it with the world. I'm just part of that world. I walked back to my model ship, running my fingers along the careful work I'd done. I have $200,000 in a retirement account. It's what's left from your mother's life insurance and my pension fund. That money was supposed to be for my future, for the life Eleanor and I planned but never got to live. Brandon scoffed. You're 68 years old. How much future do you really need? You've got the house paid off, your pension, Social Security. You're comfortable. Jessica and I are just starting out. We need that capital to build our lives. The casual cruelty of it, the assumption that my remaining years were less valuable than their luxury wedding, settled over the kitchen like fog rolling in from the Pacific. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw a stranger wearing her face. Where had I lost her? Was it college, surrounded by wealthy classmates whose parents gave them everything? Was it Brandon's influence, his constant emphasis on appearances and status? Or had Eleanor and I done this ourselves, protecting her from consequences until she expected protection as her birthright? I'm not giving you $100,000 for a wedding. The words came out calm, final. I'm not giving you anything more, actually. The monthly checks stopped today. Jessica's mouth fell open. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. Dad. She tried for a softer tone, stepping closer. I know 100,000 sounds like a lot, but this wedding is important to us. Can't you see that? Brandon's family will think we're poor if you don't match their contribution. Then Brandon's family will think you're poor. Brandon's face flushed red. You selfish old man. You're really going to embarrass your own daughter over money? Jessica told me you were generous, that you'd always taken care of her. Guess she was wrong about you. Get out of my house. What? Jessica looked genuinely shocked. Both of you. Out. Now. Brandon grabbed Jessica's arm. Come on. We don't need him. We'll figure it out ourselves. At the door, he turned back. You know what, Walt? You're going to regret this. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. When you're sitting alone in this house with nobody visiting, nobody calling, you'll realize you threw away your family over money. And it'll be too late. They left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle Eleanor's collection of sea glass in the window. I stood in the sudden silence, listening to my own heartbeat, feeling the weight of the decision I'd just made. My phone sat on the table next to the model ship. I picked it up and scrolled to Rick Palmer's number. He answered on the second ring, his voice carrying that eternal optimism of someone who'd spent 50 years around boats and ocean. "Walt. What's happening, old friend?" "Rick, remember that Catalina 38 you mentioned last month? The one that just came into the marina?" A pause. "The Blue Hole? Eleanor's dream class boat?" "Yeah, it's still available. Owner's relocating to Arizona, wants a quick sale." "Why?" I looked around the kitchen, at the life I'd built, at the model ship representing all the dreams I'd set aside for other people. "I want to see it today. I think it's time I bought myself a boat." The harbor view and sat 3 blocks from the marina, a modest 2-story building that had weathered 40 years of coastal storms without complaint. Room 12 smelled faintly of ocean and coffee, with a window that framed the harbor perfectly. I set my single suitcase on the luggage rack and stood there for a moment, taking in the simplicity of it. 1 bed, 1 chair, 1 table. No photographs demanding I remember happier times. No model ships reminding me of abandoned hobbies. Just clean lines and temporary peace. My phone had been buzzing since I left the cottage 2 hours ago. 17 messages from Jessica, ranging from apologetic to furious to desperately sweet. 4 from Brandon, all of them variations on the same theme about my selfishness and impending loneliness. I silenced the device and set it face down on the nightstand. The marina office opened at 7, but Rick had texted that he'd meet me at 6:30 with coffee and paperwork. That gave me the evening to think, to plan, to decide if I was really doing this or just having an old man's tantrum. I walked to the window and watched sailboats sway in their slips, their halyards clinking against masts in that particular rhythm that had always meant home to me. Eleanor's voice came back, clear as if she were standing beside me. We'd been sitting on the cottage deck 5 years before she got sick, watching the sunset paint the harbor gold. "Walt, promise me something. Promise me you won't spend your whole life taking care of everyone else. Promise me you'll do something just for you, just because it makes you happy." I'd kissed her forehead and promised, not knowing I'd only have 3 more years with her. Not knowing that promise would come due on a random Thursday in spring. My laptop opened to a document I titled simply Financial Review. 40 years as a marine engineer had taught me the value of documentation, of understanding every system before making adjustments. I started typing, organizing information I'd been avoiding for too long. Jessica's college tuition at a private university, complete with sorority dues and study abroad programs, $85,000 over 4 years. Her first wedding to Michael, Sophie's father, including dress, venue, honeymoon, and that ridiculous ice sculpture she'd insisted on, $30,000. Down payment on the condo she and Brandon bought in the newly developed Harbor District, the one with granite countertops and water views, $60,000. Monthly support payments for the past 36 months, $54,000. Total investment in my daughter's adult life, $229,000. I pulled up my bank accounts, pension statements, investment portfolios. The numbers glowed back at me in the lamplight. Social Security gave me $2,800 monthly. My pension from Maritime Engineering Associates provided another $3,200. The retirement account, carefully built over decades and supplemented by Eleanor's life insurance, held $197,000. The cottage was paid off, worth perhaps $400,000 in the current market. On paper, I was comfortable. Secure, even. But I'd been bleeding $1,500 monthly to support a daughter who earned $70,000 a year in marketing and a son-in-law whose real estate career consisted mostly of long lunches and optimistic projections. Meanwhile, I'd been eating scrambled eggs for dinner 3 nights a week and putting off replacing the cottage roof because the estimate had come back at $12,000. I opened a new browser tab and navigated to Pacific Harbor Marina's website. The Catalina 38 was listed in their sales section, blue hull gleaming in professional photographs. Well-maintained cruiser, perfect for coastal exploration. Recent survey shows excellent condition. Owner motivated. The price was listed at $95,000, exactly $5,000 less than Jessica's wedding demand. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. I could give her $100,000 for 3 days of performance and photographs, or I could give myself a boat that represented every dream I'd deferred. Eleanor's dream, really. Our dream together, the one we'd let slip away year after year because there was always something more important, someone who needed help, some family obligation that came first. My fingers moved across the keyboard, composing an email to Margaret Chen, the financial advisor who'd helped me navigate Eleanor's estate. Margaret was precise, practical, and refreshingly blunt about money matters. She'd already expressed concern about my monthly transfers to Jessica, calling them unsustainable given my fixed income. I explained the situation briefly, avoiding emotional language, sticking to facts. I asked her to review my accounts and confirm what I already knew, that I could afford this boat, that it made financial sense for my retirement, and that ending the monthly support payments would actually improve my long-term stability. Her response came back within 20 minutes. "Walt, I've been hoping you'd have this conversation with yourself. Yes, you can absolutely afford this purchase. In fact, given fuel efficiency and the potential to live aboard part-time, you'd save money compared to maintaining the cottage alone. More importantly, cutting that monthly drain means your retirement funds can actually grow again. Call me tomorrow and we'll discuss the details." "But Walt, buy the boat. Life's too short." I leaned back in the cheap desk chair and felt something loosen in my chest. Permission, maybe. Validation. The confirmation that taking care of myself wasn't selfish but necessary. That at 68 years old, I'd earned the right to choose my own dreams over someone else's demands. The next email went to my bank, requesting they stop the automatic monthly transfer to Jessica's account, effective immediately. Confirmation would arrive in 3 business days, but the action was irreversible once processed. My finger hovered over the send button for only a moment before clicking through. Sleep came easier than expected that night, despite the unfamiliar room and the weight of decisions made. I dreamed of open water, of Eleanor laughing at the helm, her gray hair whipping in the wind as we sailed south toward California waters we'd never explored. Morning arrived gray and soft, typical for coastal Oregon in late spring. I walked to the captain's cup at 6:15, finding Rick already there with 2 paper cups of coffee and a folder thick with documentation. He'd been my friend since we served together on the USS Enterprise 45 years ago, back when we were young men who thought we'd live forever. Now we were old men who knew better but kept showing up anyway. "Walked past your cottage this morning." Rick slid 1 coffee across the table. "Saw Jessica's car there at 5:30. She was sitting in the driveway, just sitting there staring at the house. She still have her key?" "Don't know. Didn't see her try the door." Rick opened the folder, revealing surveys, maintenance records, and sales documents. "Want to talk about what's happening, or should we just look at boats?" "Boats first. Talk later, if at all." He nodded, understanding that some decisions were too fresh to discuss, too raw to examine in the bright light of morning judgment. We spent an hour reviewing every detail of the Catalina. She'd been built in 1992, well maintained by an owner who actually loved her rather than just owned her. Recent survey showed solid hull, updated electronics, reliable diesel engine. The sails were only 3 years old, replaced after the previous set showed wear. She slept 6, though I'd only need berth for 1. The galley was compact but functional, the head recently renovated. Owner's asking 95, but I think he'd take 88 if you're serious. Rick watched my face. "That's a fair price for her condition. You could spend twice that and not find better." "I'm offering 95. The words surprised both of us. I want him to know she's going to someone who values her properly. I want this transaction to be clean, quick, and without negotiation. Rick leaned back, studying me with those sharp eyes that had spotted enemy vessels before radar confirmed them. This isn't about the boat, is it? It's entirely about the boat. I met his gaze. For once in my life, Rick, it's entirely about what I want. Not what's practical, not what's expected, not what makes other people happy. Just what makes me happy. Eleanor would approve. Eleanor would be furious I waited this long. We finished our coffee in comfortable silence, watching the marina wake up around us. Fishermen hauling gear, tourists asking about charter rates, seagulls arguing over discarded bait. The rhythm of harbor life, unchanged by personal drama or family disappointment. The ocean didn't care about hurt feelings or broken expectations. It just kept moving, kept breathing, kept offering escape to anyone brave enough to take it. By 8 o'clock, I was standing on the dock beside the Catalina, running my hands along her hull with the practiced assessment of someone who'd spent a lifetime understanding how vessels were built. She was solid, well-balanced, designed for cruising rather than racing. The blue paint was faded in spots but showed no signs of neglect. Her name was still visible on the stern, Second Chance. I smiled at that, at the universe's sense of humor. The owner, a thin man named Gordon with sun-weathered skin and sad eyes, met us on deck. His wife had died last year, he explained. They'd planned a sail to Mexico together. Without her, the boat was just a reminder of dreams that died with his partner. He needed to let her go, to stop looking at her every day and remembering everything he'd lost. I understood that completely. I also understood that boats, unlike people, could be saved. Could be given new purpose, new adventures, new life. I'll give you $95,000. I didn't wait for Rick's negotiating preamble or Gordon's sales pitch. Cash deal, close in 7 days, no inspection contingencies beyond what's already documented. She's exactly what I'm looking for. Gordon's eyes filled with tears he tried to hide by turning toward the horizon. She's a good boat. Treat her right, and she'll take you anywhere you want to go. I intend to name her Eleanor's Dream, after my wife. We always planned to do this together. Now I'm doing it for both of us. He nodded, understanding passing between two widowers who'd learned that life continued even when you wished it wouldn't. We shook hands there on the deck, sealing the deal with nothing but mutual respect and shared grief. Rick witnessed it all with quiet approval, knowing this was more than a transaction. This was me choosing to live again instead of just existing in the shadow of other people's expectations. Walking back to the marina office to sign preliminary paperwork, my phone buzzed with another text from Jessica. Dad, please. We need to talk. I'll come to you. Just tell me where you are. I typed back slowly, choosing words carefully. I'm buying a boat. The money you wanted is going toward my future instead of your wedding. This decision is final. When you're ready to have an actual conversation instead of a negotiation, I'll be here. But the answer about money won't change. Her response came immediately. You're choosing a boat over your own daughter? I stared at that message for a long time before responding. No. I'm choosing myself. There's a difference. I hope someday you'll understand that. The news spread through Harborview with the efficiency of tide coming in. Small coastal towns operated on a currency of information, and apparently my boat purchase was worth discussing. By Wednesday afternoon, 3 days after I'd signed the initial paperwork with Gordon, I couldn't walk to the post office without someone mentioning it. Dorothy Sullivan caught me first, standing outside the Harbor General Store with her shopping bags and that knowing expression she'd perfected over 73 years of watching her neighbors' lives unfold. She'd lived next door to Eleanor and me since we'd moved to Lighthouse Point Road, had brought casseroles after the funeral, had watched Jessica grow up from a distance that allowed her to see things I'd missed. Walt Henderson, I heard you bought the blue Catalina from Gordon Mitchell. She didn't phrase it as a question. Dorothy never asked questions when she already knew answers. Also heard your daughter wanted that money for some fancy wine country wedding. Word travels fast. Word travels accurately when people tell the truth. She shifted her bags, studying my face with sharp intelligence. Good for you. That girl's been running you ragged for years. Time you did something for yourself. I started to defend Jessica out of habit, but Dorothy held up one weathered hand. Don't. I've watched her park that expensive car in your driveway twice a month for 3 years, watched her leave an hour later with that entitled bounce in her step. Never once saw her bring groceries or offer to help with your yard work. Just take, like you were an ATM machine with her father's face. The assessment stung because it was accurate. Dorothy patted my arm with surprising gentleness. Eleanor would be proud of you. She worried, you know. Told me once that she was afraid you'd give everything away and have nothing left for yourself. Said Jessica never learned the difference between helping and taking advantage. I walked away from that conversation feeling exposed but validated. If the neighbors had noticed, had been watching Jessica's pattern of extraction for years, then maybe I wasn't crazy. Maybe I wasn't being selfish or cruel. Maybe I was just finally seeing what everyone else had observed from the outside. The Dockside Diner was my next stop, the lunch counter where I'd eaten fish and chips every Friday for 15 years. Linda, the owner, looked up from wiping tables and grinned when I walked in. Well, if it isn't Harborview's newest sailor. Heard you're taking delivery next week. Thursday, actually. Rick's helping me move her to a permanent slip. Also heard your daughter's been calling everyone in town trying to figure out where you're staying. Linda brought me coffee without asking, settling onto the stool beside me. She called here yesterday, asked if I'd seen you. Wanted to know if you seemed okay, like maybe you were having some kind of mental crisis. My jaw tightened. What did you tell her? Told her you seemed better than you have in years. Told her buying that boat was the sanest decision I'd seen you make. Linda stirred sugar into her own coffee, a habit she claimed kept her honest with customers. Walt, I've been serving you lunch for 15 years. I've watched you eat soup and sandwiches while she posted pictures online of fancy restaurant meals. Don't think I didn't notice. The afternoon brought more encounters, each one adding layers to my understanding of how visible my situation had been to everyone except me. Tom Willis from the marine supply store mentioned he'd stopped by the cottage last week to deliver some parts I'd ordered, had seen Jessica's car there and Brandon loading boxes into their trunk. Boxes that looked suspiciously like they came from my garage, items I'd been storing for them because their condo didn't have enough space. Margaret Chin called at 4 o'clock, her voice carrying the professional warmth of someone delivering good news. Walt, I've reviewed everything. Your retirement accounts are solid. The boat purchase won't impact your stability at all. In fact, I ran projections. Without that monthly $1,500 going to Jessica, you'll actually increase your net worth by about $18,000 annually. $18,000. I repeated the number, calculating mentally. That's what I've been losing every year. Correct. And that's conservative, not counting the extras you've probably been paying without documenting them. Birthday gifts, emergency funds, random help that doesn't get recorded. Margaret paused. Walt, I need to tell you something as a friend, not as your advisor. When Jessica came to see me 2 years ago asking about your financial situation, I refused to share details. She wanted to know exactly how much you had, claimed she was concerned about your well-being. But the questions she asked weren't about your well-being. They were about accessing your accounts. The revelation hit like cold water. She wanted access to my money? She asked about power of attorney, about being added as a joint account holder, about what would happen to your assets if you became incapacitated. Margaret's voice carried careful neutrality. I told her that your affairs were private and properly organized. She wasn't happy about that. I thanked Margaret and ended the call, sitting in the motel room as afternoon light shifted across the floor. Jessica hadn't just been taking what I offered. She'd been planning for more, positioning herself to control everything if I became vulnerable. The manipulation went deeper than I'd imagined, more calculated than simple entitlement. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message contained a photo of Sophie, my granddaughter, holding a drawing she'd made. The caption read, "Sophie misses her papa. She made this for you. She doesn't understand why you won't visit anymore." The emotional manipulation was so transparent it almost made me laugh. Almost. Instead, I saved the photo and replied to the unknown number, which was obviously Jessica using Brandon's phone. "Tell Sophie I love her and I'll see her soon." But communications go through proper channels, not through guilt trips. Thursday morning arrived with fog so thick the harbor disappeared into gray nothing. Rick found me on the dock at dawn, both of us holding coffee and watching weather that would delay the boat transfer by at least 6 hours. We stood in comfortable silence until he finally spoke. "Jessica came to the marina office yesterday. Wanted to know which slip you'd rented, said she needed to talk to you urgently." Rick sipped his coffee. "I told her that information was private. She threatened to call the harbor master and report me for being uncooperative." "Did she?" "She did. Harbor master told her to mind her own business." Rick smiled slightly. "Turns out Bill's daughter went through something similar with her ex-husband. He's not sympathetic to people who use family connections as weapons." The fog began lifting around noon, revealing the harbor in pieces. Masts first, then hulls, then finally the docks and buildings that made up the marina community. By 2 o'clock, Gordon was there with final paperwork and the keys to Eleanor's dream. We completed the transfer with minimal ceremony, just two men who understood that boats represented freedom as much as transportation. I spent the afternoon aboard, familiarizing myself with her systems, checking storage, planning modifications. The galley needed minor updates. The navigation electronics could use modern equivalents. The cushions in the main cabin were worn but serviceable. Every corner held potential, every system offered chances to apply the engineering skills I'd spent 40 years developing. Rick appeared on the dock around 5 carrying takeout from the dockside diner. We ate fish tacos in the cockpit, watching the harbor prepare for evening. Other boat owners waved or called congratulations. The sailing community had a way of welcoming new members, of understanding that choosing this life meant something specific about character and priorities. "You know she's been posting about you online." Rick said it casually, but I heard the warning underneath. Facebook, Instagram, all those places. Playing the victim, talking about elderly parents who abandon their children, asking for prayers during her difficult time. I should have been angry. Instead, I felt a strange detachment, like watching someone else's drama from a safe distance. What's the response been? Mixed at first. But then people who actually know you started commenting. Sullivan wrote a whole paragraph about watching you support Jessica for years. Linda from the diner mentioned the restaurant meals versus your soup lunches. Tom Willis talked about seeing them load your stuff from the garage. Rick grinned. The narrative's not going the way Jessica planned. That evening, I received an email from Father Miguel Santos at St. Catherine's by the Sea. The church where Eleanor and I had been married, where we'd brought both kids for baptism, where I'd sat alone 4 years ago listening to strangers say comforting lies about my wife at her funeral. Miguel had been a young priest then, awkward with grief, but he'd grown into his role with surprising wisdom. The email was brief. "Walt, I've heard various versions of what's happening with you and Jessica. I'd like to invite you both to meet with me, if you're willing. Not to take sides, but to facilitate honest conversation. Sometimes family needs a neutral space to speak truth. Let me know if this interests you." I stared at that message for a long time, considering whether I wanted church involvement in private family matters. But Miguel wasn't offering judgment or mediation based on obligation. He was offering space for honesty, which was different. I replied that I'd be willing to meet, but only if Jessica agreed voluntarily, without pressure or manipulation. Her response came 2 hours later, forwarded through Miguel. She'd agree to meet Sunday afternoon, after services, in the church office. The message was formal, cold, nothing like the desperate texts and emotional voicemails I'd been ignoring all week. Friday brought unexpected visitors to the marina. Brandon's parents, Roger and Patricia Carmichael, found me on the boat around mid-morning. They were exactly what I'd expected, expensively dressed, carefully groomed, carrying themselves with the confidence of people who'd never questioned their place in the world's hierarchy. Roger spoke first, his voice carrying practiced authority. "Walter, we need to discuss this situation you've created. Our son is extremely upset, and Jessica is practically hysterical. This wedding is important to both families, and your refusal to participate financially is causing unnecessary strain. I climbed out of the cabin where I'd been organizing equipment and stood on deck, looking down at them on the dock. The height advantage felt appropriate. I'm not refusing to participate. I'm refusing to fund it. Patricia stepped forward, her smile sharp. Surely you understand that parents contribute to their children's weddings. It's traditional, expected. We're putting in $75,000, and honestly, we expected you to match that or exceed it, given that Jessica is your only daughter. I have 2 children. Michael is my son, in case you'd forgotten. Of course, but daughters require more financial support for weddings. Patricia waved her hand dismissively. Everyone knows that. The bride's family typically covers the majority of expenses. I felt my blood pressure rising but kept my voice level. I paid $30,000 for Jessica's first wedding. I'm not paying for another one. Roger's expression hardened. That's remarkably selfish, Walter. You're living comfortably on your pension and Social Security. You have this house paid off. What do you need money for at your age? Jessica and Brandon are building their future. They need capital to establish themselves properly. They need to learn to live within their means. Means? Patricia laughed, actually laughed. Walter, they're young professionals in an expensive housing market. Nobody expects them to pay for everything themselves. That's what family money is for, to help the next generation maintain appropriate standards. I looked at these people, at their casual assumption that my retirement savings existed to fund their son's lifestyle, and felt something cold settle in my chest. Let me be very clear. I'm not giving Jessica money for this wedding. I'm not giving her any more money, period. The monthly support I've been providing ends immediately. If Brandon can't support a wife without his father-in-law funding their life, perhaps he shouldn't be getting married. Roger's face flushed dark red. How dare you insult our son? Brandon is extremely successful in commercial real estate. Really? Because I called 3 of his former colleagues. He hasn't closed a deal in 14 months, and his last sale was to his uncle. His success seems largely theoretical. The silence that followed was glacial. Patricia recovered first, her voice dropping to something dangerous. You investigated our son? What kind of paranoid old man are you? The kind who spent 40 years in engineering learning to check facts before committing resources. I crossed my arms. Your son and my daughter have been living beyond their means on my money. That stops now. If you'd like to increase your wedding contribution to cover what I'm not providing, that's your choice. But don't come to my boat and tell me how I should spend my retirement. They left without another word, Patricia's heels clicking angrily on the dock. I watched them go, then returned to the cabin and sat down heavily. My hands were shaking, adrenaline flooding my system in a way that hadn't happened since I'd stood up to incompetent supervisors in my engineering days. Rick appeared in the companionway minutes later, eyebrows raised. Heard that conversation from 3 slips away. You just declared war on the Carmichael family. Good. I looked up at my old friend. Let them come. I'm done being polite about people stealing from me. Sunday afternoon arrived with the kind of brilliant sunshine that made the Oregon coast look like a postcard designed to sell impossible dreams. I walked to St. Catharines by the Sea at exactly 2 o'clock, wearing the same khaki pants and button-down shirt I'd worn to Eleanor's funeral. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. Today felt like another ending, another ritual of letting go. Father Miguel met me at the side entrance, his young face creased with concern that seemed genuine rather than performative. He'd grown into his priesthood well, learning when to speak and when to simply witness. We shook hands without unnecessary words and he led me to his office, a small room overlooking the cemetery where Eleanor rested beneath a simple headstone that read, "She loved the ocean." Jessica was already there, sitting in one of the 3 chairs arranged in a semicircle. She dressed carefully, I noticed. Conservative blue dress, minimal makeup, hair pulled back in a style that made her look younger than 31. The strategy was obvious. She wanted to appear as the dutiful daughter, the vulnerable child being abandoned by an unreasonable parent. Brandon was notably absent. "Thank you both for coming." Miguel settled into his chair, positioning himself equidistant between us. "I want to start by saying this isn't about me choosing sides or making judgments. This is about creating space for honest communication. Walt, would you like to begin?" I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, searching for any hint of genuine remorse or understanding. Her expression was carefully neutral, guarded. "Jessica, do you know why I'm angry?" "Because I asked you to help with my wedding." Her voice carried that carefully controlled emotion, like she was working hard not to cry. "Because you think I'm being unreasonable asking for financial support." "No." I leaned forward slightly. "I'm angry because you demanded $100,000 like it was owed to you. Because when I said no, you acted like I was betraying you instead of setting a reasonable boundary. Because you've spent 3 years taking $1,500 every month without once asking if I could actually afford it. You never said you couldn't afford it." The first hint of defensiveness crept into her voice. "You just kept sending the money. I assumed you wanted to help. Did you ever wonder why I was eating soup for dinner 3 nights a week? Did you notice that I haven't replaced my truck in 8 years, or that I've been patching the cottage roof instead of replacing it?" I kept my voice level, factual. "Did you think about any of that while you were posting pictures of weekend trips to Portland and new furniture deliveries?" Jessica's face flushed. "I work hard for my money. I deserve to enjoy it." "I absolutely agree. You should enjoy money you earn. But you've also been enjoying money I earn, money I need for my own retirement, without any consideration for what that costs me." I pulled out my phone and opened the financial document I'd prepared. $229,000. That's what I've given you since you turned 18. College, first wedding, condo down payment, monthly support. Do you know what that represents? She stared at the floor, jaw tight. That's 40% of my total retirement savings. That's 3 years of Eleanor's life insurance that was supposed to fund the sailing trips we planned together. That's my security, my future, handed over piece by piece because I thought I was helping my daughter build a life. I set the phone down. "But you weren't building anything. You were just spending, and expecting me to keep funding it forever. That's not fair." Jessica's voice rose. "I didn't ask for the college money or the down payment. You offered those things." "You're right. I did offer. And I'd do it again because that's what parents do. But the monthly payments, Jessica, those weren't offered. You asked for temporary help 3 years ago when Brandon's business was slow. Temporary became permanent, and you never once said thank you or asked if I could still manage it." Father Miguel shifted slightly. "Jessica, can you help Walt understand your perspective? What were you thinking during these 3 years?" She was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was smaller. "I thought you wanted to help. You're my father. Fathers take care of their children. Brandon's parents help them all the time. Brandon's parents are wealthy. I'm comfortable, not wealthy. There's a significant difference." I waited until she met my eyes. "But more importantly, taking care of your children doesn't mean funding their lifestyle indefinitely. It means teaching them to stand on their own. I failed at that. I kept giving instead of letting you struggle and learn. So this is my fault for accepting help you offered?" The anger was surfacing now, the real emotion beneath the carefully constructed victim narrative. "You're blaming me for believing you when you said you wanted to support us? I'm holding you accountable for never questioning whether that support was sustainable. For never once offering to help me instead of just taking. For bringing Brandon to my house and letting him disrespect me in my own kitchen." The memory of that morning still burned. "Do you even know what he said to me?" "What you said?" Jessica's hands twisted in her lap. "We were frustrated. The wedding planning is stressful, and we thought you'd be more supportive." "Supportive of what? $250,000 performance?" Jessica, your mother and I got married at the courthouse for $75 and had cake at her parents' house. We were just as married as you and Brandon will be in your wine country extravaganza. I leaned back, feeling the weariness of years catch up with me. The wedding isn't about marriage. It's about appearance, about showing Brandon's business contacts how successful you are. And you expected me to bankrupt myself so you could perform wealth you haven't earned. It's not about appearance. But her voice lacked conviction. It's about celebrating our love with people we care about. 200 guests, most of whom are Brandon's professional contacts. How many of them are actual friends? I waited, but she didn't answer. You know what your mother wanted? She wanted us to sail down the coast, just the two of us, exploring little harbors and sleeping under the stars. We saved for 20 years for that dream. Then cancer came and she died before we could do it. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. I miss Mom too. Then honor her memory by understanding what she tried to teach you. Eleanor worked as a nurse for 30 years, came home exhausted, and still found time to volunteer at the community clinic. She gave because she had something valuable to give, not because people demanded it from her. She taught you to be generous, but somehow you learned to be entitled instead. The tears spilled over now, genuine emotion finally breaking through the performance. I didn't mean to be entitled. I just thought you had enough for both of us. I don't. The simple truth hung between us. I have enough for me, for the life I want to live in the years I have left. That's all. And I'm choosing to spend those resources on myself instead of on your wedding. Father Miguel spoke carefully. Jessica, what do you hear your father saying? She wiped her eyes, mascara smearing slightly. That he's not giving me money for the wedding. What else? A longer pause. That I've been taking advantage of him. And? Miguel's voice was gentle but persistent. That I haven't been grateful. The words came out barely above a whisper. That I've been selfish. I felt something loosen in my chest, the first hint of hope that maybe she was capable of hearing truth. Jessica, I love you. I will always love you. But I can't keep sacrificing my well-being for your comfort. That's not love. That's enabling, and it's destroying both of us. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. So what happens now? You just cut me off completely and sail away? That's up to you. I pulled an envelope from my pocket, setting it on Miguel's desk between us. I've written down some conditions. Not for reconciliation, because there's nothing to reconcile. I'm your father regardless. But for trust, for the possibility of a healthy relationship instead of a financial transaction disguised as family. Jessica reached for the envelope with shaking hands, pulling out the single page I'd typed that morning. Her eyes moved across the words, and I watched her expression shift from confusion to disbelief to something that might have been anger or might have been recognition. You want me to apologize publicly? Her voice rose. To admit on social media that I've been taking advantage of you? I want you to tell the truth. I kept my voice calm. You've been posting all week about your difficult elderly father who abandoned you over money. You've been collecting sympathy and prayers while painting me as the villain. I'm asking you to correct that narrative with the same public platform you used to damage it. This is humiliating. Taking responsibility often is. I gestured to the page. Keep reading. She scanned further down. You want me to pay you back? Walt, I can't afford to pay back $200,000. I'm not asking for $200,000. I'm asking for the $1,500 a month to be repaid over time. That's $54,000 total from the monthly support. You can manage $300 a month, which is what you spend on restaurants based on your social media posts. I waited while she processed that. The rest was gifts freely given. I'm not asking for those back. But the monthly support you promised was temporary needs to be addressed. Jessica set the page down, her hands trembling. And if I don't agree to this? Then you've made your choice about what kind of person you want to be. I'll still be your father. Sophie will still be my granddaughter. But there won't be trust between us, won't be closeness. We'll be people who share DNA and history but nothing more. Father Miguel cleared his throat gently. Jessica, may I offer an observation? She nodded without looking at him. Your father isn't asking you to humiliate yourself. He's asking you to be honest. There's dignity in admitting mistakes, in taking accountability for causing harm. The people who truly care about you will respect that courage. Miguel paused. The people who only valued you for your performance of perfection, well, perhaps those relationships aren't worth preserving anyway. We sat in silence for several minutes, the only sound the distant ocean waves hitting the rocks below the church. I watched my daughter wrestle with the decision, saw the moment when pride wanted to win, and then the moment when something deeper, something more honest, pushed through. What about the wedding? Her voice was small. We've already put deposits down. Brandon's parents will be furious if we have to downsize everything. That's between you and Brandon and his parents. I have nothing to do with your wedding except as a guest, if you want me there. I stood slowly, feeling every one of my 68 years. Jessica, I bought a boat. I named her Eleanor's Dream because your mother and I always planned to do this together. I'm going to spend the next few years sailing the coast, seeing places we never got to see, living the life we postponed for everyone else's needs. You're really leaving. It wasn't a question. I'm really living. Finally. I moved toward the door, then turned back. You have until next Sunday to decide about the conditions. If you choose yes, I'll be at the marina every morning at 7. If you choose no, I'll respect that decision. Either way, I'm done apologizing for choosing myself. I left the church office and walked through the sanctuary, past the pew where Eleanor and I had sat every Sunday for 25 years. The afternoon light filtered through stained glass, painting colored patterns across empty wooden seats. At the back, near the entrance, I paused and looked at the small memorial plaque for my wife. Eleanor Ann Henderson. Beloved wife, mother, nurse. She loved with her whole heart. Outside, the ocean wind carried salt and possibility. I walked back toward the marina, toward Eleanor's dream waiting in her slip, toward the future I'd finally decided to claim. Behind me, the church bells marked 3 o'clock, marking time that kept moving forward whether we were ready or not. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Rick, how did it go? I typed back, she has a week to decide who she wants to be. Either way, I'm free. His response came immediately, attaboy. Weather forecast looks perfect for a shakedown cruise next week. You ready? I looked out at the harbor, at boats bobbing in their slips, at the horizon line where water met sky. I've been ready for 40 years. Let's sail. The following Sunday arrived quiet and cool, morning fog wrapping the marina in gray silence. I'd been aboard Eleanor's Dream since dawn, checking rigging and preparing for the shakedown cruise Rick and I had planned. Tuesday we'd head south toward Cape Perpetua, a 3-day journey to test systems and get reacquainted with living on the water. My duffel bag was already packed, provisions stored below, charts marked with potential anchorages. At 6:45, I heard footsteps on the dock. Measured, hesitant steps that paused twice before reaching my slip. I climbed into the cockpit and found Jessica standing there, holding her phone and a folder. She dressed simply, jeans and a sweater, her hair loose around her face. No performance this morning, just my daughter looking uncertain and young. I wasn't sure you'd come. I gestured to the cockpit. Want to sit? She climbed aboard carefully, settling onto the bench across from me. For a moment, we just sat there, two people who'd once been close trying to remember how that felt. The fog muffled sounds from shore, creating a bubble of privacy in the gray morning. I wrote the post. She held up her phone, screen facing me. I haven't published it yet. I wanted you to read it first. I took the phone and read slowly. She'd written 3 paragraphs, clear and direct. She acknowledged taking financial support for 3 years without questioning whether I could afford it. She admitted expecting a wedding contribution that was unreasonable given everything I'd already provided. She apologized for the social media posts that had painted me as an abandoning parent when the truth was that I'd simply set necessary boundaries. The post ended with a statement that she was working to become someone worthy of my trust again. This is good. I handed the phone back. Honest without being dramatic. Takes responsibility without making excuses. Brandon hates it. She said it quietly, staring at the screen. He says I'm humiliating our family, making us look poor and pathetic. His parents called it social suicide. What do you think? She was quiet for a long time, watching fog drift past the mast. I think I've been lying to myself about a lot of things. About money, about what I deserve, about why Brandon wanted to marry me in the first place. She looked up at me. Did you know he borrowed $50,000 from his parents last year? They think he invested it in his real estate business. He actually lost it playing online poker. The information didn't surprise me. Men who lived beyond their means usually had hidden debts accumulating in dark corners. Are you still marrying him? I don't know. Her honesty was startling. I thought I knew him. Thought we wanted the same things. But the way he reacted when you said no to the money, Dad, it scared me. He wasn't disappointed about the wedding. He was furious about losing access to your accounts. I let that sit between us, not pushing, just witnessing her working through realizations that had probably been building for months. She opened the folder and pulled out a check, handwritten, dated that morning. $300, with a memo line that read first payment, with apologies. I canceled the wine country venue yesterday. Told them we were downsizing. She set the check on the bench between us. We're going to do something smaller at Brandon's parents' house, probably just 50 people. His mother is livid, but I don't care anymore. The whole production was making me sick anyway. I'm proud of you. The words felt inadequate but true. That took real courage. I talked to Sophie last night. Told her the truth, age-appropriate version, about how I'd been asking you for too much money and you needed to take care of yourself. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. She said that made sense because you're old and old people need to save money for medicine and stuff. Then she asked if you still loved her. My throat tightened. What did you tell her? That you love her completely and forever, and you're going to take her sailing as soon as I say it's okay. She wiped her eyes. Is that okay? Can she come visit you here? Anytime she wants. Anytime you both want. I picked up the check, folding it carefully and putting it in my shirt pocket. Jessica, I meant what I said at the church. I love you regardless of money or weddings or any of this. But I can't go back to being your funding source. That relationship was destroying both of us. I know. She stood, steadying herself against the boom. I'm going to post this now, before I lose my nerve. Then I'm going to figure out what I actually want from my life instead of just performing what I think I'm supposed to want. She tapped her phone screen several times, then showed me. The post was live, visible to her 800 social media connections. Within seconds, reactions started appearing. Some supportive, some shocked, some probably gleeful at the drama. I watched her face as she read responses, saw her wince at a few, smile slightly at others. There. She pocketed the phone. Done. No taking it back now. Accountability usually feels terrible at first. I stood and pulled her into a hug, feeling how thin she'd gotten, how much tension she carried in her shoulders. It gets easier. Eventually it even feels like relief. She clung to me for a moment, then stepped back. Will you send me pictures? From your trip? Every port. I walked her to the edge of the boat, helped her onto the dock. Jessica, whatever you decide about Brandon, about the wedding, about your life, I'm here. Not as a bank account. As your father. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and walked back down the dock. I watched until she disappeared into the fog, then returned to my preparations. Rick arrived an hour later with breakfast sandwiches and news that the marine forecast looked perfect for our departure Tuesday morning. 3 months passed like a dream made of salt water and sunlight. Eleanor's dream carried me down the Oregon coast, through California waters, into harbors I'd studied on charts for decades but never visited. I learned her rhythms, her preferences in different seas, the way she responded to wind and current. In quiet anchorages, I felt Eleanor's presence so strongly I'd turn expecting to see her, only finding empty cockpit and the ghost of shared dreams finally being honored. Jessica's payments arrived like clockwork, $300 on the first of each month with memo lines that evolved from payment to with love to thank you. We texted regularly, sometimes daily, rebuilding connection through small honest exchanges instead of financial transactions. She sent me photos of Sophie's second-grade art projects and her own marketing work. I sent her pictures of sunsets and seals and the unexpected joy of watching dolphins pace the bow. She called in September to tell me she'd ended things with Brandon. The decision had been building, she said, as she recognized how much of their relationship had been built on image and expectation rather than actual partnership. They'd sold the condo, split assets, handled the dissolution with surprising maturity. Brandon had moved back to Seattle. His parents were no longer speaking to her, which she admitted was a relief. In October, I sailed back into Harborview for winter. The cottage on Lighthouse Point Road had renters now, a young couple with a baby who appreciated its proximity to the harbor. I'd arranged that before leaving, deciding that maintaining an empty house I rarely used made no sense. The rental income covered property taxes and insurance, turning the family home into an asset instead of an anchor. I moved aboard Eleanor's dream permanently, winterizing her for cold months, settling into the rhythms of marina life. Dorothy Sullivan brought me casseroles. Rick and I played chess in the captain's cup most evenings. Father Miguel stopped by occasionally to talk philosophy and share coffee. The sailing community embraced me as one of their own, people who'd chosen freedom over convention, simplicity over accumulation. Jessica came for Thanksgiving, bringing Sophie and a surprising guest, her younger brother Michael, who I hadn't seen in 2 years. We ate turkey sandwiches in the cabin, laughing about childhood memories and making plans for a summer cruise together. Sophie wanted to learn navigation. Michael wanted to photograph the coastline. Jessica just wanted time together without agendas or expectations. Standing on deck that evening, watching my family walk back to shore through marina lights reflecting on dark water, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Not just peace or satisfaction, but genuine happiness earned through difficult choices and maintained boundaries. Eleanor's dream had become mine, and in living it, I'd finally learned the difference between loving people and losing yourself to them. The boat rocked gently beneath my feet. Tomorrow I'd check weather for another cruise south, maybe down to San Diego this time. Maybe I'd go alone, maybe I'd invite Rick, maybe Jessica would surprise me by asking to come along. The choice was mine, and that freedom felt like the greatest gift I'd ever given myself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.